Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the session today for the statements of the international organizations at the URC 24. I hope all of you had a very good first day at the conference and you were able to get impressions and had exchanges and dialogues and benefited from the Recovery Forum. Now is the opportunity and occasion for you to make your statements. I think all of you have a list of who is going to present a statement today. My name is Christine Tötzke. I'm the responsible Director General for the region in BMZ. You will have up to 4 minutes for your statement, and I already heard from some of you that you are quite scheduled today and have other meetings, so please try to be in time. This session is going to be live streamed, but before I give the floor to you, I will give the floor to my colleague Anka Feldhusen, who is the Director of Civilian Crisis Prevention and Stabilization in the Foreign Office, and she was until summer 23 ambassador in Kiev. Anka.
Thank you, Christina. Good morning, everybody, here to this session of statements from the international organizations, whom, in my time as ambassador in Ukraine until last July, I had the pleasure of either meeting or visiting the projects you have been very actively implementing in Ukraine. Congratulations to that. We had a very good partnership also, and I'm looking forward to hear from you today what has happened since I left Kiev. And I'm very happy to give the floor to the first speaker, the Vice President of the World Bank, Ms. Antonella Bassani. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning. And Russia's invasion of Ukraine continues to cause staggering human and economic losses. A recent World Bank survey of living conditions in Ukraine reveals that more than 1/5 of adults who were working before the war have now lost their jobs. Some two-thirds of households have neither savings nor labor income. A third of surveyed families reported modifying or skipping meals altogether. 3 of every 10 Ukrainians now live in poverty. And almost 3 million more Ukrainians would have fallen into poverty had not been for the continued transfers provided by the government and made possible through bilateral and multilateral support from various sources. So Ukrainian families are now coping by relying on family members or on public transfers, and it's clear that government efforts and partner support have helped mitigate the expected healthcare impacts. 90% of health clinics remain open, even in areas under active hostilities. So the support that we all provide is making a difference on the ground. Now, this resilience is significantly a result of the government efforts, even during the war, pushing for reforms. These reforms have been crucial in the European Commission Ukraine facility. They are also central to our support in the World Bank, including under a series of operations which are leveraging government efforts to boost competition, strengthen the financial sector, and support energy markets, trade, and fiscal reform. Together with our support for the government continuing sectoral reforms in finance, transport, housing, health, education, and social policies. The private sector is also showing impressive resilience. Another World Bank survey shows that many Ukrainian firms have adapted their business strategies, operating at a lower capacity, finding new customers and markets, leveraging digital tools, and changing their product services mix to adapt and survive. So to support reform and essential investment, the World Bank Group has mobilized commitment and pledges from the international community, amounting to more than $42 billion since the start of the war, and approximately $36 billion has been disbursed to date. Ukraine has demonstrated through its resilience that its future is limitless. The World Bank will continue to work closely with the government and all Ukrainians and development partners to help realize this future. Thank you.
Thank you to the World Bank. And I now give the floor to Mr. Achim Steiner as Administrator of UNDP and I think also representing the UN Secretary General here today. Mr. Steiner.
Thank you. He is indeed, and on behalf of the United Nations Secretary General, it is my privilege to join all of you to this event co-hosted by Germany and the Ukraine. I will abbreviate my speech since you said we are a little bit in terms of time pressed, but I would direct you towards our website for the full version of my speech. Let me begin by saying that I speak on behalf of the United Nations family, some of whom are also very much represented here with us this morning. Active in every part of Ukraine, 24 UN entities and 3,000 UN personnel are working alongside state authorities and local communities to address the immediate humanitarian needs and in tandem pave the way for early recovery, reconstruction and development in line with the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. Where the security situation allows, the UN has significantly scaled up its recovery efforts, implementing $1.1 billion worth of recovery and development programming during the years 2022 and 2023, and indeed expecting to almost double that with a $1 billion investment of resources mobilized with the support of many partners present at this conference to promote a rapid, gender-responsive, inclusive and green recovery. Today I would like to briefly outline how the UN's recovery efforts led through our UN resident coordinator, humanitarian coordinator and the UN country team are advancing the 4 dimensions of the Ukraine Recovery Conference. First, given that small businesses are the backbone of Ukraine's economy and a key driver of the recovery, the UN has already supported over 2,000 small and medium-scale enterprises in 2023 alone. The UN, through the United Nations Development Programme that I lead, also has a new Economy Recover offer that aims to assist at least 100,000 entrepreneurs, including women, veterans and returnees, while improving the economic conditions of at least 5 million people by 2027, as we join forces with our sister agencies. Second, we are investing in human development to ensure that all people can contribute to and benefit from the recovery. For instance, that includes supporting the reconstruction of the energy grid, something that was highlighted time and again yesterday, both as an immediate short-term priority, but also the long-term transition and reconstruction strategy that Ukraine has defined for itself. Our efforts have so far benefited some 6 million people, and we continue to intend to scale this work up. Third, the UN is prioritizing a comprehensive model of recovery planning, which includes assessing the damage and equipping and supporting local authorities with the resources they need. To my left sits the Deputy Executive Director of UN Habitat, just as one example of how UN agencies are at the moment as part of the country team, supporting recovery planning and implementation in more than 400 of the Hromadas, the local municipalities affected by the war, directly informed also by communities' needs. Such efforts encompass removing landmines, pieces of unexploded ordnance, just to mention one aspect of this work, so that people can begin to return home and millions of square meters of land can be farmed again. Finally, given Ukraine's national priority of accession to the European Union, the UN continues to respond to the government's request for technical assistance. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, with generous support from our donors, the United Nations family continues to focus on the immediate humanitarian needs. We are also advancing the government's recovery priorities, which include working alongside key partners like international financial institutions. To my right sits our colleague from the World Bank, but also others, the EBRD, the EIB, and to leverage critical financing for development. This is part of the UN's strategic, science-based and holistic approach to recovery and reconstruction, with a key focus on women, aiming to drive a generational shift in Ukraine's economy, exemplified by the Green Recovery Platform. This approach will accelerate resilience, green growth, decent jobs, as well as more effective and accountable public institutions that deliver essential public services. Yet the only sustainable solution to this war, as we all know, remains in achieving a just and lasting and comprehensive peace, anchored, as the Secretary General has repeatedly called for, in the principles of the UN Charter and international law, ensuring that the drums of war and destruction fall silent and the thrum of creativity, hope and recovery can resonate across every corner of the Ukrainian country. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Steiner. I now give the floor to the Assistant Secretary General and Acting Executive Director of UN Habitat, Michal Milinar.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. In follow-up to the joint statement of the UN family that has been just delivered by Mr. Achim Steiner, the administrator of UNDP, we have a few additional areas to contribute with. I recently visited Ukraine and saw firsthand that amidst the ongoing war, it is critical to ensure we support the recovery in Ukraine whenever and wherever possible. It is important to keep the country going, it is important to sustain populations, and it is important to support people's return where and how we can. In doing so, we have opportunities to support Ukraine in shaping a new sustainable future, one that will be very different from the past. That future will be increasingly urban. As this conference is doing, this requires a strong focus on urban recovery, on supporting local governments to plan their way forward. Almost 2 years ago at the World Urban Forum in Katowice, Poland, mayors of Ukrainian cities, merely months after the start of the invasion, had already impressed me with their commitment and their visionary leadership. As they focused on defending their cities and addressing their immediate needs, they were setting time aside to plan for their future. Supporting national and local governments in urban recovery is what UN Habitat does best. We are working closely with the Ministry of Restoration of Ukraine and have set up an urban lab in Ukraine, in Kiev, to help smaller cities and towns with their recovery planning. Allow me to thank here the government of Germany for their support so we can deploy our expertise. Germany has been our main donor in this particular project that we are implementing in Ukraine. Additional thank you goes also to the governments of Slovakia and the United States of America as also our important donors in that context. The lab is there for all of you. It is designed to be a platform to learn from each other as we go and to ensure we strengthen Ukrainian urban planning expertise collectively. To make urban recovery effective, there are 5 key messages that UN Habitat would like to advance. First, urban recovery needs to take into account the pre-war urbanization and population trends that the war are accelerating. Second, urban recovery needs to reflect urban and territorial regeneration strategies based on a realistic economic future, borrowing from European Union practices and instruments. And of course, EU integration remains an important benchmark for Ukrainian government and for the people. Thirdly, urban recovery needs to move beyond transparency targets to clear sustainability targets. Fourth, urban recovery needs to move beyond the current focus on individual projects, using spatial planning for more integrated interventions. Fifth, urban recovery requires a focus on immediate policy gaps as the comprehensive policy reform with EU integration in mind is initiated. UN Habitat is proud to join at this Ukraine Recovery Conference the Coalition for Sustainable Municipalities and the Alliance for Gender Responsive and Inclusive Recovery, and I look forward to working with all of you in support of the Ukrainian population. And it is important that we continue coordinating our efforts as UN family, but also with other important players on the side of international organizations and the international financial institutions to deliver together for the people of Ukraine. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. And I must say, I think already from the first interventions, we got a very good impression of how important the engagement of the international organizations is. And I'm really thrilled how you try to to connect to the dimensions and to the alliances which will be one of the main deliverables of this URC. Thank you so much for that already. I now give the floor to Mr. Monticelli, who is the Governor of the Council of Europe Development Bank. Mr. Monticelli, it's yours.
Thank you so much. Well, first of all, I want to thank the German authorities for organizing this very important event, which has allowed the international community once again to rally together to support Ukraine. The Council of Europe Development Bank is proud to be part of the international team, is proud to serve as Ukraine's partner of choice for social investment. Yesterday, we signed our two first loan agreements, one with the Ministry of Health for a project known as HEAL, the other with the Ministry of Communities, Territories and Infrastructure Development for a project called HOME. Each loan is for an amount of 100 million. The HEAL project deploys instrumental resources for meeting urgent health needs, including the provision of mental health and rehabilitation services. These services are more necessary now than ever before. The HOME project finances compensation for destroyed housing, helping thousands of displaced people from Ukraine find a new home and a new footing in life. Ukraine became a member state less than a year ago. I am particularly proud that these loan agreements have been finalized so quickly. We owe these remarkable results to the ownership and determination of the Ukrainian authorities, as well as to the SEB's agility and efficiency. But this is just the beginning. At the margins of this conference, the SEB is also signing two joint statements, one with the Ministry of Social Policy and one with the Ministry of Communities, Territories and Infrastructure Development. These joint statements affirmed our shared commitment to deepen cooperation in the two areas which are key to the recovery and future prosperity of Ukraine: housing and human capital. In both areas, the SEB is making grant resources available to finance urgent actions. Particularly noteworthy here is the partnership to develop and deliver psychosocial services at the community level. To rebuild their lives, feel part of society and contribute to recovery efforts, people need a place to call home. They must also have access to essential services and infrastructure for their health, education and well-being. This is why investment in social sectors is indispensable for creating the conditions for people to return home and for society to be inclusive. The SEB is eager to work alongside Ukraine on these urgent priorities and stands ready to deploy additional financing. We are proud to be part of the international effort to stand by Ukraine in defense of its freedom, which is, after all, the freedom of us all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Monticelli. I now give the floor to Mr. Aurel Laurentiu Plosciano, who is from the European Economic and Social Committee, the Vice President for Communications. It's your
Thank you very much indeed. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I am deeply honored to take part in this important event today in Berlin. My name is Laurentiu Plosciano and I am the Vice President for Communication of the European Economic and Social Committee, the house of the organized civil society in Europe. More than 800 days ago, the Russian Federation brought back the war to Europe, violating the values of freedom, democracy and justice on which the European Union is based. Immediately, the entire democratic world ran to Ukraine's support, and our committee also played its part. We have reinforced our long-standing cooperation with Ukraine's vibrant civil society. we have opened the Ukrainian hub, which offers a working space to Ukrainian organizations which had to relocate to Brussels because of the war. But most importantly, we have started the Enlargement Candidate Members Initiative, a project which includes the EU candidate countries in the work of our committee. We have selected 23 Ukrainian employers' organizations, trade unions and NGOs who will contribute to selected EESC opinions related to enlargement and key European policies. The start of this Enlargement Candidate Members Initiative coincided with the beginning of the screening process, which will pave the way for the beginning of the accession negotiations, which we strongly support. Ukrainian flag is blue and yellow. Together, they embody the unity of the Ukrainian people and their aspirations for a peaceful and prosperous future. These are also the main values recalled in the blue and yellow colors of the European flag: harmony and solidarity. This symbolically shows that Ukrainian future belongs to the European Union. Today, we gather here to focus on sustainable recovery and the long-term reconstruction for Ukraine. At House of Organized Civil Society, we strongly believe that these processes cannot happen without a meaningful involvement of social partners and civil society organizations. Indeed, civil society has been the country's beating heart during its darkest moments, and it stands ready to contribute to the reconstruction once the war is over, with its expertise, engagement, and of course the experience. Thank you so much for your kind attention, and let's work together for the European future of Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Plosciano. I would like now to give the floor to Mrs. Tatiana Molchan from UNECE, Under Secretary General of the UN Executive Secretary of UNECE. Please.
Thank you so much. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, these 2 days we have gathered here to discuss how to support the recovery and reconstruction of Ukraine. Last week I was in Ukraine, and one of the key questions was, do we need these discussions now? Are they timely to discuss recovery when on a daily basis there is still devastation, there is still shelling on the cities, people still go to the shelters, to the bombing? How you can really develop a business when you have to work underground and without electricity? I have to say that then, and even more after these 2 days here in Berlin, I'm convinced that it's the right time to discuss this. We have to be prepared to start to continue the reconstruction and the support of Ukraine. And UNECE, my organization, is a very technical one. We work with organizations to develop norms, standards in legal instruments and guidelines, and for the overall goal of implementing the SDGs. But what is important, that I strongly support also many of the colleagues that have mentioned that we need to invest in the human capital. We have to make it possible for the people to return to the country. This is why, from the many activities and the support that we have been providing together with other partners to Ukraine, a big focus is on this dimension, the human resources, and housing is one of the key aspects under the UN for Ukraine Cities project that has been funded and is supported by Germany. We have been supporting Mykolaiv and Kharkiv with developing the master plans, but also the central authorities to develop the legal framework that is much needed to speed up the reconstruction process. And we will continue to press that this legislation is in place if we need real reconstruction, a speedy reconstruction. Also, the environmental aspect, I would like to praise the German authorities for including this, and Ukrainian colleagues for having a dedicated track dedicated to environment, and the platform for action on green recovery that we have launched yesterday with OECD and UNEP together looks exactly at this: reconstruction in a sustainable way, in an environment-friendly way. So these are a few points that I wanted to underline and to confirm our strong commitment to support the recovery process and to underline that this is the right time to do it. This is the right time to prepare and to be ready to launch with all necessary forces this recovery process. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Molchan, and you echo what I experienced myself. The reconstruction actually began on the first day after the full-scale war had started, but now Ukraine needs to build back better with all our help and support also. Thank you for that. I now give the floor to Mr. Matthias Landgren from the International Transport Forum. He is the Special Envoy to the Secretary General for Reconstruction of Ukraine and Senior Advisor, Secretary General's Office.
Well, thank you so much, Madam Chair, dear Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, my friends. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity for the International Transport Forum to take the floor. I speak on behalf of the Secretary General, Dr. Jan-Tae Kim. For those who are not so familiar with the ITF, let me just briefly say that the International Transport Forum at the OECD is an intergovernmental organization with 69 member countries, and we act as a think tank for transport policy. When I look around in this room, I see tremendous power. Power to make change, power to make a difference, power to foster and enable cooperation, and power to rebuild back Ukraine better. And I see commitment. Just take a look around you. Just absorb the previous statements that we have heard here so far. And my friends, of course, our forces combined in this room may even move mountains, and we need to move them in order to rebuild Ukraine. All organizations here today have a work stream on Ukraine. My organizations, like-minded member countries, over 30 so far, has created a common interest group on transport for Ukraine, the CIG4U, and it's co-chaired by the governments of Canada, Lithuania, Sweden, and of course Ukraine. The CIG4U consists of two pillars. The first, the mechanism will coordinate support for Ukraine's immediate transport-related material needs. The CIG4U will act as a platform to exchange information about the transport and infrastructure needs identified as urgent by the Ukrainian government, that is, like immediate repairs, replacements, material, and other actions to ensure the function and safety of Ukraine's transport system. The CIG4U will coordinate support for addressing these needs within the international transport community, including national and international stakeholders and the private sector as well. The coordination mechanism will meet at least monthly to review Ukraine's current needs and identify how they can be best addressed and by whom. The second pillar is to provide analytic support for the long-term rebuilding of Ukraine's transport links. The group will initiate reviews of different transport modes and areas of the Ukraine transport sector. The aim is to provide the Ukrainian government with recommended policy pathway and strategic infrastructure plans, including the identification of core corridors and infrastructure for connecting Ukraine and its future trading partners. We have identified around 20 projects and is now being prioritized by Ukraine. The first project is already on its way and we will identify pathway to sustainability for Ukraine road and rail freight sectors, and we have 4 more coming up shortly. But let me just come back to what I said initially. We need to cooperate, to combine our forces. We need to move away from the silos that we sometimes are stuck in and take advantage of our combined power to rebuild back Ukraine. By doing so, we minimize the duplication work, we learn from each other, and are able to move at a faster pace that is so important as the war is raging in Ukraine. And this is why it is so valuable to meet you all, and I do thank the organizers to give us the opportunity to convene and make and share our statements. And again, thank you so much for letting the ITF take the floor.
Thank you very much, ITF. I see that exactly. I see that the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development has joined us. Matteo Patrone, Vice President for Banking. Matteo, I'm happy to see you here. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Anke. Sorry for being late. As the largest institutional investor in Ukraine, EBRD has invested more than 4.2 billion euros since 2022 and the full-scale invasion. In 2024, we have already deployed around 500 million euros. And our shareholders recently agreed to provide 4 billion euros in capital increase to enable the EBRD to continue deploying 1.52 billion during the conflict, to step up to 3 billion euros after the cessation of the hostilities. Our financing has been directed towards both the public and the private sector, focusing on energy security, vital infrastructure, food security, private sector resilience and trade facilitation. Our investments in the real economy directly support Ukraine's economic resilience and restore livelihoods of people affected by the war. Enhancing energy security is even more important now, given the increasing attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure. We have deployed 1.5 billion euros of financing for Ukraine's energy sector since the full-scale invasion, including for gas purchases and emergency repairs of power infrastructure. We announced last week that we will mobilize more than 300 million euros for Ukraine's energy companies to ensure stable and uninterrupted power supply. This funding will support the urgent restoration of generation facilities and facilitate the construction of new distributed generation capacity. We are also at the forefront of supporting the recovery of local and municipal infrastructure. EBRD offers a programmatic approach to support Ukraine's municipalities, combining investments with technical assistance and capacity building. At the URC, we have announced a new package of 143 million euros in support of Ukrainian municipalities, including providing water supply for Mykolaiv, support district heating in Lutsk, improving public transportation in Zhytomyr, and provide liquidity support to Kiev, Kryvyi Rih, and Kharkiv. Enhancing the resilience of the private sector is also a key priority, which includes direct investments, guarantee facilities and SME credit lines, and trade facilitation. Earlier this year, we launched 2 new financing windows under our portfolio resharing instrument, a veteran reintegration support program for banks and their clients, and an enterprise renaissance program to support micro and small medium-sized enterprises that suffered destruction or loss of assets during the war, with additional investment incentives for reconstruction as part of the EU for Business initiative. The EBRD is committed to strengthening human capital resilience as part of our investments and policy engagements. We are proud to have joined the Skills Alliance and to be working in partnership with the Minister of Economy towards the first human capital charter for businesses in Ukraine. We actively support investments in skills and the reintegration of veterans and women into the labor force. We are really impressed by the resilience of the Ukrainian people and businesses during the wartime. Equally impressive is the progress made to implement reforms, and we have witnessed that through the support we have given to the Ministry of Economy for the approval of the SOE corporate governance law. Good governance, indeed, strong institutions and anti-corruption are the cornerstones to enable a strong, sustainable recovery. The EBRD remains a key partner to support Ukraine's reform efforts, including through the Ukraine Reforms Architecture Programme implemented by the EBRD and managed in partnership with the EU, which provides capacity support for government to implement the reforms. These reform support teams will play a key role to help the government deliver the commitments envisaged in the Ukraine plan. As a strong and committed partner of Ukraine, the EBRD invests in Ukraine's economy now and during the wartime, while we work with Ukraine and all partners to lay a strong foundation for the country's long-term recovery, anchored in Ukraine's European aspirations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matteo. And you probably know that Germany is particularly invested in the development of local governance, so I was happy to hear what you said on that. Energy was the other issue that you raised, and I'm happy to give the floor now to the Director of the Energy Community, Mr. Artur Lokowski.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The Energy Community Secretariat has been proactive and innovative in reacting to the full-scale invasion in Ukraine since the first days of this invasion. Following up on the call of Commissioner Simpson and Minister Galushenko, the framework of the Ukrainian Energy Support Fund was set up within the days after that. The fund today is one of the most efficient ways to channel monetary resources to answer the urgent needs of the Ukrainian energy infrastructure. The pledges are fast approaching 500 million euros, a milestone hard to imagine just a year ago. But the needs in Ukraine keep increasing. Flexibility of the pledges is pivotal to react to the ever-changing situation on the ground and enable the rapid deployment of equipment in line with ever-changing priorities. 12 individual countries, the European Union, and numerous private entities have made funds available, which remained open and to the contributions from the private and public sectors. The Secretariat acts as fiduciary of the fund, while the procurement services are provided by the USAID. The fund has just launched a procurement for implementers of a 31 million worth project for equipping hospitals in Ukraine with rooftop solar panels and battery systems, which will make themselves less vulnerable against attacks, but also feed electricity back into the grid. With reconstruction needs, imminent and distributed generations being strategic to ensure security of supply, Secretariat will be cooperating with IRENA to de-risk greenfield investment in large-scale renewable projects. The Secretariat also created a task force which on a daily basis is supporting the private companies from the European Union and beyond in assisting and in delivering the in-kind equipment to the Ukrainian energy sector. Almost 150 donations from 24 countries and 100 companies have been assisted by the Secretariat so far, representing over 5,600 tons of highly specialized goods delivered to 72 companies in 18 regions of Ukraine. The Secretariat, however, is also assisting Ukraine in making necessary reform. In this regard, the National Energy Climate Plan is pivotal, and this is the plan which has been and will be today announced by the Ukrainian government. Secretariat recommendations to the plan were published last week. The Secretariat's initiative, the high-level advisory group, opened the door for international partners' input. The NECP serves as a basis for Ukraine plan and as a trigger for Ukraine facility. And the real work starts now with implementing the NECP. The Secretariat strives to set up a robust mechanism to continuous monitoring and institutionalized dialogue among the Ukrainian and international partners. The Secretariat, what I also wanted to mention, is in cooperation with the international law firms, is offering the service pro bono support to Ukrainian energy companies in developing legal strategies and initiating proceedings in international tribunals for infrastructure damages. The most recent opening of the legal claim by Ukhrhydroenergo against Russia Federation for the destruction of the Kakhovka Dam is the best example of that. Secretariat is and will remain committed to support and continue supporting Ukraine as long as it will take. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lorkowski, and I think there was no session in this conference so far where the issue of energy and energy security has not been raised. So thank you very much. I would now like to give the floor to Raimund Jehle, who is Regional Program Leader for Europe and Central Asia at FAO, and as we know, the agricultural sector is another very important sector in Ukraine. It's your turn.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's really my pleasure to address you on behalf of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, and allow me to extend my appreciation, particularly for the resilience of the Ukrainian farmers who continued to feed Ukraine and the world. The agriculture sector and the food sector is strongly affected by the war, with agriculture losses and damages estimated at 80 billion. An estimated 17.4 million hectares of arable land is contaminated with explosives and mines. The damaged energy infrastructure, which has been just also mentioned, causes critical disruption for the agriculture sector amongst all actors of the value chain. In 2023, small and medium-sized agriculture enterprises faced particular increasing difficulties, and according to the FAO assessment which we have done, about 1 in 4 rural households reduced or interrupted agricultural production. FAO's emergency response and recovery program, fully integrated in the UN response and in close collaboration with the government in 2023, has already restored first food security and self-sufficiency of 100,000 households and critical agricultural production, supporting more than 6,000 small farmers, including supply of energy generators for critical food processing value chain actors and demining. Secondly, distributed grain sleeves storing almost 6 million tons of grains, and completing, thirdly, the renovation of veterinary and phytosanitary laboratories, facilitating the important increase of export of grain. In 2024, FAO is further supporting Ukraine in its efforts to maintain its food security at the national and its contribution to the global level, and the FAO 2024 response plan, fully integrated with the UN and the partners, is an important part of the reconstruction and outlines first the empowering of rural resilience, comprehensive packages for small farmers, One Health, integrating approach to animal health and livestock support, thirdly, access to safe and affordable firewood for war-affected rural communities connected to the energy security, fourth, rapid resumption of income-generating capacity, and fifth, restoring agriculture in the face of land contamination. The aim is of FAO to mobilize 150 million to reach more than 800,000 people by the end of the year. This is complemented, of course, with a forward-thinking and longer-term planning if the situation in the country allows. In that sense, FAO really welcomes discussions happening during this recovery conference and stays committed contributing to the recovery of Ukrainian agri-food systems while supporting the most vulnerable who are suffering from the emergency context. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jelle. We have heard a lot of times that for funding all the needs the Ukraine needs in the next years, public funds will not be enough. So I'm happy to invite Mr. Alfonso Garcia Mora from the International Finance Corporation. And as you are one of the major actors when it comes to private sector mobilization, it's your floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you for inviting us to participate in this session, which I believe is quite relevant as a good way to close this successful conference, and I would like to congratulate the organizers for that. So let me start by emphasizing that IFC, the private sector arm of the World Bank Group, never stopped investing in Ukraine and maintained a strong operational presence, even if the situation was not easy, especially at the beginning. Since the invasion, we delivered over 1.4 billion to support private sector, and we expect another 1.4 billion in the next 12 months. These are investments that have gone directly and only to private sector companies. IFC has been mostly focused on short-term and working capital financing to keep the lights on, as we like to say, especially since the invasion started. We provided trade finance guarantees, given the relevance of trade flows in the country and the stop of many of these flows at the beginning of the invasion. We established risk-sharing facilities for MSMEs with the banks who have ample liquidity but are risk-averse. And since the beginning, we try to communicate with them and try to find out ways in which we could incentivize the provision of more credit to the private sector, even if the situation from a risk perspective was quite adverse. Third, we provided working capital and selective capex for agribusiness, that, as our colleague from FAO mentioned just now, is an absolutely critical sector, not just for Ukraine, but for the rest of the world. And four, we channel risk capital to tech businesses, asset-light businesses that actually could be relevant for the recovery, but also for the reconstruction of the country, given the expertise that this country has. We are committed to do more, and donor support will be critical for this. In Ukraine, blended finance can crowd in up to 3 to 4 times more capital than the one that we put. So the leverage impact that we can have by using institutions or solutions like the ones that we provide, we believe are critical, and as you, Madam Chair, mentioned, this will be fundamental in order to be able to actually cover, or at least to go close to the $500 billion that the World Bank has estimated as the recovery needs. We need to leverage private capital. We need to make sure that each dollar that we put from donors can actually be leveraged and attract more private capital. We are grateful to our partners, the European Commission, Switzerland, the UK, the Netherlands, Canada, who provided grants and guarantees for several projects, and other countries with which we are discussing exactly the same type of support as we speak. We are also very grateful to the European Commission for the €350 million top-up guarantee that we announced yesterday here in Berlin, that will allow us to multiply and to probably mobilize more than $1 billion of private capital. Increasing donor support will help us to move towards CAPEX projects in critical sectors such as energy and transport and telecom, where reconstruction needs are rapidly growing. So the move from agribusiness, trade finance, reselling facilities focused on SMEs towards more CAPEX projects of core infrastructure will be critical in the coming months. Yesterday, we announced that we will support investment in a modernization of a shipping company in Ukraine, entry of the largest since invasion FDI to Ukraine telecom sector, and later today we will sign an agreement to support a 150 megabytes renewable energy project. All these sectors are analysed in our report, Private Sector Opportunities for a Green and Resilient Reconstruction, that, as you could see, we try to analyse what are the reforms that are actually needed in each of the sectors in order to mobilise private capital and therefore to try to cover part of the $500 billion reconstruction needs with private sector financing. We are working very closely with the World Bank on those reforms which can crowd in private investment. And I would like to finalise by acknowledging the strong focus of the government of Ukraine on structural and pro-market reforms. It is really impressive that they have and they will pass this year, only this year, more than 240 reforms in Parliament to really crowd in private capital and to do the work that is needed to have a healthy reconstruction and recovery. I have never seen a country that in 1 year has actually approved 240 reforms in Congress. So big congratulations to the Ukrainian authorities for that. As part of the World Bank Group, IFC looks forward to working with all of you to support Ukraine, and thank you again and congratulations for the conference.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mora. You mentioned reforms. So this is also one thing. The International Monetary Fund is scrutinizing all the time, and you are the organization, the crucial organization when it comes to macroeconomic stabilization. I would like to give the floor to Vaham Stepanian, who is the resident representative to the IMF in Ukraine.
Thank you and good morning. Ukrainian authorities continue to deliver an impressive performance under their IMF-supported program, despite the challenges of the war. Staff-level agreement on the fourth review of the EFF was reached on May 31st, as the Ukrainian authorities have delivered on their program commitments, and understandings were reached on economic and financial policies to sustain stability. Subject to approval of our executive board, completion of the fourth review will enable a disbursement of around $2.2 billion. The combination of skillful and agile policy making by the Ukrainian authorities, the adaptability of households and firms, and very large external financing $42.5 billion in 2023, has delivered tangible economic benefits to Ukraine. Real GDP expanded by 5.3% in 2023, inflation remained low, and adequate levels of gross international reserves have been maintained. However, the near-term outlook has worsened. Since late March, widespread missile and drone attacks on energy infrastructure have damaged or destroyed close to a half of generation capacity. Growth is thus expected to slow this year. The period ahead is extremely challenging. Risks to Ukraine's IMF-supported program remain exceptionally high, mainly from what appears to be a rising likelihood of a longer war. Other risks stem from potential delays in external financing, which could lead to a re-emergence of liquidity pressures, threatening Ukraine's hard-earned socio-economic stability and accentuating policy-making trade-offs. The social and economic impact of further shocks should not be underestimated. Maintaining macroeconomic stability and growth in these challenging circumstances will require careful coordination and continued strong commitments from both the authorities and donors. First, the authorities need to maintain prudent policies to sustain macroeconomic and financial stability. This will be a difficult balancing act in view of the mounting risks, but also given substantial needs for social protection, recovery, and revitalizing the economy. Thus, accelerating domestic revenue mobilization and maintaining strict expenditure controls are key priorities. Coordinated and careful management of monetary, exchange rate, and financial sector policies also are critical as risks increase. The Fund will continue to work very closely with the authorities as they design and implement these policies and reforms. Second, it is critical for donors to deliver in full and in a timely manner on their commitments for 2024 and beyond, especially should the risk of a longer war materialize. It is also important that external financing be as concessional as possible. To conclude, we are at a critical juncture with risks on the rise. Preparedness and close coordination between Ukraine and its partners will be key to respond decisively to any new shocks. Sustained, timely, and predictable concessional financing from Ukraine's partners is required. Without this, it will be extremely challenging for the government to meet its core needs and preserve socio-economic stability. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stepanian, for this assessment and statement. And I would now like to invite Mr. Tim Lardner, the Regional Director for Europe and Central Asia of UNOPS. Please.
Madam Chair, Excellencies, colleagues, over 2 years have passed since the start of a brutal war that's brought tremendous human suffering to Ukraine. It's taken countless lives, resulted in massive injuries, and forced millions to flee their homes. The cost of reconstruction and recovery now stands at $486 billion. Now, more than ever, we owe it to the courage and resilience of the Ukrainian people to speak about and to act for the recovery of Ukraine. Since the start of this war, UNOPS has worked to respond to humanitarian and recovery needs, together with the UN family, Ukraine's national and municipal governments, and other partners, including the European Union, the governments of Denmark and Japan, and the World Bank. We've done so building on our expertise in infrastructure, procurement, and our support for mine action. We've delivered modular boiler houses and hundreds of generators that provide uninterrupted access to electricity to residents and critical services. This work remains crucial as targeted attacks on the energy infrastructure continue and have left Ukraine's energy system as 32% of its pre-war capacity. We're committed to responding to immediate energy needs while supporting a green and resilient energy transition in Ukraine. We're repairing over 90 schools throughout Ukraine so that children can resume their education. we procure specialized equipment to support infrastructure reconstruction. We help repair transport infrastructure, delivering bridges and helping restore the railway networks. We supply critical medical equipment, working together with the private sector, because we know that the scale of the recovery needs simply cannot be funded solely from public sources. As we help rehabilitate entire neighborhoods in Kharkiv and Mykolaiv, with a focus on social cohesion and inclusiveness so that refugees can come home and have access to essential services such as housing, education and healthcare. And importantly, we support efforts to remove the explosive remnants of war scattered throughout Ukraine, delivering relief to heavily affected communities in what is now the most mined country in the world. The effective clearance of explosive hazards is key to peace, security, normality, and ultimately sustainable reconstruction of the country. As Ukraine responds and rebuilds, UNOP stands by to support a recovery that accelerates the country's progress towards the sustainable development goals and supports alignment with the EU acquis. We'd like to thank the German government for organising this incredibly important event. UNOP stands ready to work in partnership with you and the Ukrainian government to support communities across Ukraine. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Mr. Ladner, and I'm happy you mentioned mine action. Demining Germany has again mobilized 20 million euros this year for mine action in Ukraine alone. I would like to give the floor to Mr. Jaroslav Ponder, the head of the ITU Office for Europe. Mr. Ponder, it's your turn.
Thank you very much, Excellencies, esteemed guests, and dear participants. On behalf of the ITU, we would like to thank organizers, and in particular Germany, for providing this opportunity for contributing to the deliberation of this important conference, with special focus on digital, which is very close to our heart. As you know, we are, as the UN Agency for Digital, since almost 160 years, we have been working with all countries on the universal meaningful connectivity and accelerated sustainable digital transformation. Therefore, once this occurred, what has happened in Ukraine, we, upon the guidance of our membership and provided through the special resolution of the ITU Council, and the ITU continues to support Ukraine on the rebuilding of its telecommunication infrastructure. In 2022, we have carried out the interim assessment of damages to the telecommunication infrastructure and resilience of the ICT ecosystem in Ukraine, also developing the digital development country profile, which are serving as the tools for prioritization of the work. Since then, we have, of course, joined the EU, UN, and World Bank contributing to their DNR reports, and which the last one was released in this year, in February 2024. As we know, the total recovery and reconstruction needs in the digital sector are estimated at the 4.67 billion over 10 years. To address these requirements, there is an urgent need for a comprehensive approach involving all stakeholders. This is the reason why the ITU continues coordinating with all relevant stakeholders, including administration of the Ukraine, UN system, international organization, financial development institutions, donors community, academia, and others. There's no doubt that digital is a driver of sustainable development, but also instrumental for accelerated recovery process and solid foundation for resilience. Therefore, we urge all partners to support all projects leading towards digital infrastructure recovery and strengthening digital resilience. Since the beginning of the war, we have deployed the ITU partner to connect a digital coalition mechanism, collecting pledges from all over the world. We extend our sincere appreciations to all stakeholders that provided pledges, collectively amounting to over $750 million. Please let me use this opportunity to invite all stakeholders to announce their pledges, commitments, aiming at supporting actions related to digital in Ukraine, and equally important, work together with the P2C Digital Coalition partners on the implementation in order to avoid any kind of the overlaps. We are equally deeply grateful for the financial contributions to the special fund in trust made by Japan, Czech Republic, Bulgaria and numerous countries which provided in-kind contributions. Last but not the least, we much appreciate also efforts and coordination with Ukrainian colleagues, which are always standing ready to support, coordinate and respond at the time needed. Dear ladies and gentlemen, as we speak, over 10 million people in Ukraine have limited access to broadcasting services. Over 40 broadcasting stations, being the state-owned infrastructure, were affected by the war, and several of them fully damaged. Can you imagine life without TV, radio, and the most important, emergency notifications, and many other broadcasting services? It's difficult. Since September 23, ITU provides technical assistance to reconstruct the broadcasting infrastructure in Ukraine. ITU has developed a series of initial project proposals for restoration or reconstruction of the 10 most critical broadcasting stations. Building upon outcomes of this exercise, IT is currently facilitating the efforts towards the identification of the financial support of €12 million to start operationalization of the rehabilitation of this infrastructure of above mentioned 10 broadcasting stations. Simultaneously, we are looking for resources to continue assessments of remaining 30 stations, which rehabilitation may require at least €100 million, not talking about rebuilding. In parallel, ITU continues to support administration in building its human capacities, leading towards the rollout of the 5G infrastructure in the country, providing the executive trainings and targeted support. ITU works hand in hand also with the GIZ and the BMZ on the digitalization through the rollout of the GovStack initiative in Ukraine, in particular focusing on the DI engine, simultaneously supporting Ukraine in promoting its excellence in digital and its expertise offered to the global community. Dear ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, accept our assurance of highest consideration and be reassured that ITU is committed to supporting the Ukraine recovery process in the digital. One more time, thank you very much to the host for providing this platform for further strengthening cooperation on digital and to foster Ukrainian resilience. And we are looking forward to continued process on the rehabilitation and also on the digital component at the future conferences, which has the potential to be strengthened. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pondo. I now invite Klaus Beck, the Deputy Director, Regional Director, Eastern Europe and Central Asia Regional Office of the United Nations Population Fund. The floor is yours.
Madam Chair, Excellencies, thank you for the successful organization of this Ukraine Recovery Conference and for the opportunity to address it in my capacity as the Deputy Regional Director of the United Nations Population Fund based in our regional office for Eastern Europe and Central Asia. I am here today to reaffirm UNFPA's commitment to the people of Ukraine during a challenging time. With ongoing attacks causing death, injuries, stress and anxiety in the country and attacks on civilian infrastructure, particularly energy infrastructure, social systems need support. Ukraine is experiencing major demographic shifts as a result of the full-scale invasion. Millions of people have been displaced or have left as refugees, most of them women and children. Families are facing challenges stemming from men going to war. Female-headed and single-earner households are growing, along with a rise in households with individuals with disabilities. The number of births has dropped to a record low, and population aging is accelerating. Ukraine's human capital is getting depleted. UNFPA is therefore prioritizing support for building human capital and demographic resilience as a key element of a broader recovery effort. Recovery is not just about rebuilding physical infrastructure. It is also about building an inclusive environment in which people, including women, young people, and people living with disability are empowered, live with dignity, and can realize their full potential. It is for this reason that UNFPA used the opportunity of this conference to be a signatory to the Alliance for a Gender-Responsive and Inclusive Recovery, which was just launched and which we are deeply committed to. UNFPA is on the ground across Ukraine, walking the talk. We support the authorities to maintain vital services. This includes people's access to life-saving sexual and reproductive health services and to services for survivors of gender-based violence, including conflict-related sexual violence. We support the government by providing psychosocial support and strengthening vital social services for women and their families. We also work to prevent gender-based violence from occurring in the first place. As Ukraine moves forward with its EU accession process, our initiatives align with the country's broader goals of reform and modernization. We are committed to supporting Ukraine in developing policies and accountability frameworks that guarantee access to essential health and gender-based violence services. Our efforts are aimed at building long-term resilience and sustainability. By working together with government partners, civil society, the private sector, and international partners, we can accelerate a recovery that is equitable and enduring. Our initiatives in Ukraine, supported by a significant investment and collaboration with local stakeholders, aim to create a more inclusive, cohesive society with a stronger, more accountable institutions where everyone realizes their full potential. UNFPA commits itself to be there every step of the way, no matter how hard it might get, no matter how long it might take. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I unfortunately have to leave to Oslo now. I was really happy to hear how our joint efforts have already succeeded in supporting Ukraine in these terrible times. On 840 days now, the war has lasted, the full-scale war. Thank you for everything you are doing in cooperation with Germany as many other donors, and have a good trip back to wherever you go to. Thank you.
I would now like to invite Dr. Martin Frick from the World Food Programme. He's the director of the WFP Global Office in Berlin.
Thank you, moderator, for the opportunity to speak today. I'm honored to present the ongoing efforts and collaborations of the UN World Food Programme in Ukraine, focusing on our initiatives to strengthen resilience, support the agri-food sector, enhance social recovery and human capital, and address humanitarian mine action. Ukraine is one of the world's most important bread baskets, significantly contributing to global food security and playing a pivotal role in the supply of affordable food products to WFP operations and the world's hungry. In 2020, despite the COVID-19 pandemic, Ukrainian farmers managed to produce and sell over 400,000 metric tons of food to WFP in 2020, doubling the previous year's contribution. By 2021, this figure rose to over 800,000 metric tons. Amidst the ongoing war, WFP has still procured over 1.2 million metric tons of food from Ukraine, with nearly 1 million tons exported all over the world. In 2023, despite setbacks such as the non-renewal of the Black Sea initiatives and continuous attacks on the agricultural sector, Ukraine remained our largest food supplier, providing nearly 420,000 metric tons and accounting for 17% of our global procurement. Conversely, WFP continues to be a steadfast supporter of the government of Ukraine and supports government's capacities across three key areas. First, we are partnering with numerous Ukrainian actors to support the crucial agricultural sector. WFP works with 12 frontline bakeries across 5 regions, ensuring they stay in business, improve production capacity, and employ more people. We've already procured 238 metric tons, or if I can translate that, nearly 500,000 loaves of bread for our programs. Additionally, we engage with small-scale farmers and rural families, the backbone of fruit and vegetable production, ensuring diet diversity for millions. These efforts are crucial as their livelihoods have been severely impacted by the war and by the Kakua Dam destruction. We continue our assistance along the front line with food that was largely bought locally, benefiting Ukrainian businesses. To combat increasing micronutrient deficiencies, WFP has been working on the fortification of wheat flour, vegetable oil and milk. Since June 2023, fortified wheat flour and oil have been included in our in-kind distributions. Damage to farmland, the presence of mines and explosive remnants, the contamination of soils by heavy pollutants have a devastating effect on the agriculture that has suffered an estimated $80 billion in damage and losses due to the war. Therefore, a WFP priority is the support to Ukrainian farmers so that they can cultivate their land again safely. Regions like Kharkiv, Mykolaiv and Kherson face severe landmine contamination, threatening food security and livelihoods. In 2023, FAO and WFP together piloted a project in Kharkiv Oblast, which assessed 5,400 hectares of land and prepared or already cleared 7.5 hectares. This year, the project is expanding to new locations and partners. Our methodology, endorsed by the Ukrainian government, aims to release agricultural land for productive use, boosting the recovery effects and efforts of a country that largely depends from agricultural exports. Second, on the human dimension, WFP is working with the government to foster resilience and social inclusion. We are investing in national systems to build a shock-responsive safety net. Since 2022, our partnership has simplified the application process for 3.7 million displaced people, expedited benefits approval, enhanced online security for financial transactions, and enabled rapid emergency assistance. We have also supported the Pension Fund of Ukraine, targeting vulnerable individuals receiving less than the minimum subsistence level. Launched in August 2023, the program initially focused on old age pensioners in frontline areas and was expanded in February 24 to include people with disabilities. By May 2024, we reached over 750,000 people and transferred more than $64.5 million, helping them avoid negative coping mechanisms. WFP remains committed to working with the ministry of this project and expanding its area of collaboration so that it can help build back a better and more shock-responsive social system. Lastly, education remains a priority. Despite the war, WFP is committed to the Ukraine school nutrition reform launched just before the conflict escalated. Since last 2022, we've been collaborating with the Ministry of Education and the Office of the First Lady to support school meals. Now covering 13 regions and reaching 100,000 students, our support ensures better quality and diverse food options, reducing burdens on local administration and on parents. WFP's efforts from food security to social protection and education demonstrate our unwavering commitment to Ukraine's resilience and recovery. Together, we can help Ukraine build back stronger. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Frick, for laying out the important work of WFP when it comes to sustaining food security, not only in Ukraine, but globally. Thank you very much. The importance of local governance has been mentioned several times so far, and you know that local dimension is one of the 4 dimensions here of the URC. So I'm very pleased now to invite Mr. Vasco Alves Cordero, President of the European Committee of the Regions, to take the floor.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, distinguished guests. Let me stress 2 or 3 points that for us, the Committee of the Regions, European cities and regions across Europe, and the European Alliance of Cities and Regions for the Reconstruction of Ukraine are of the utmost importance. When the Russian Federation launched the full-scale aggression of Ukraine, both the Committee of the Regions and cities and regions across Europe have responded with solidarity and assistance to our fellow Ukrainian parts, not only welcoming refugees, but initiating from the early stage peer-to-peer relationship with Ukrainian cities and regions to help in the reconstruction and recovery efforts. We have sent supplies and materials and welcomed displaced Ukrainian women, children and elderly, providing health services, education, housing and employment. And we are proud to have done so. In Ukraine, local and regional councils have been doing an amazing job of providing emergency support and of keeping basic services running. They have shown courage, resilience and innovation. Likewise, we cannot manage the task of the reconstruction without cities and regions. Responding to an appeal made by President Zelensky that suggested mobilizing European cities and regions to help Ukraine recover from the war, the Committee of the Regions, the European Committee of the Regions, together with other European associations of local and regional authorities, has launched the European Alliance of Cities and Regions for the Reconstruction of Ukraine. The aim of the Alliance is to advocate for a reconstruction that includes the participation of local and regional authorities, and our work, I think, has been proven so far successful. One of the examples is the program of this conference and the growing recognition that the fully recovery and reconstruction of Ukraine cannot be done without local and regional authorities. I welcome the Lugano Ukraine Recovery Conference clearly referred to the importance of local self-governance, effective decentralization and democratic participation of the population in the recovery process. Those Lugano principles should be our compass. And I would like to congratulate Germany for putting the local and regional dimension so high in this URC agenda. The European Alliance of Cities and Regions for the Reconstruction has contributed to the Ukraine Recovery Conference with many recommendations in this area. They are built on 4 guiding principles. First, unwavering support for Ukraine's territorial integrity, sovereignty and unity. Second, a bottom-up approach. No one-size-fits-all approach coming from the central government only, but a place-based design of the reconstruction agenda itself and its implementation. Local ownership will be essential to make the reconstruction a success and mainly a sustainable success. Third, good local and regional governance. This is an essential element also on the way to EU accession. The reconstruction is an opportunity. I don't want to be misunderstood, but it is, in fact, an opportunity to empower local and regional governments and to pursue the decentralization reform. Fourth principle, build back better. It is essential that the reconstruction efforts have a sustainable, green, smart and inclusive approach. Let me stress in this point the most immediate and urgent challenge that Ukrainians face. It's about power supply as they approach the winter, as they approach next winter, and they need to have solutions and help to address these challenges. So, to conclude, I would like to stress that from the COR, the Committee of the Regions side, from the Alliance side, no matter how long it takes, no matter what it takes, we stand firmly with the Ukrainian people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President Cordero, for your very strong words. Very much appreciated. I would now like to give the floor to Ms. Krista Pickard from UNESCO to point out a bit what you do in a field that is sometimes does not gain so much attention, but nonetheless is very important. You are the Director of Culture and Emergencies at UNESCO. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam. Dear colleagues, Excellencies, today, as we discuss the journey of Ukraine's recovery and reconstruction, it is imperative to address its multifaceted dimensions, focusing on a human-centered approach and the intrinsic need to safeguard Ukraine's cultural sector, education, media and the sciences as cornerstone of sustainable recovery and peace. Since the full-scale invasion by the Russian Federation on 24th of February 2022, UNESCO has been acting as part of the UN country team at several levels. First, we monitor damage and needs in areas within our mandate. As of today, UNESCO has verified and documented damage to 412 cultural sites across Ukraine and condemned the killings of 14 journalists and media workers. Second, working in cooperation with the government, national institutions, civil society organizations and partners, UNESCO provides emergency assistance and prepares the ground for long-term recovery. As reiterated by a number of countries who participated in the conference on the recovery of culture sector of Ukraine held in Vilnius only last week, at the initiative of Lithuania and in partnership with UNESCO, there can be no healing of the wounds of war without culture. There can be no sustainable growth and prosperity without culture. This is why UNESCO has worked with the Ministry of Culture as well as the national and international partners to comprehensively support the culture sector. UNESCO's assistance includes the establishment of a culture hub in Lviv as a platform for training of culture professionals, artist residencies for displaced artists, the integration of intangible cultural heritage in the school curriculum, and the use of art as a leverage for communities' resilience. To protect education, ensure the continuity of learning, the quality of education, and the well-being of school communities, UNESCO continues to support teachers through the provision of digital devices, pedagogical materials, and teacher training. Address the impacts of conflict and learners' mental health. Support teacher professional development through teacher training institutions and restoring education infrastructure. As also emphasized by the recent Lviv Media Forum, a free media sector with its needs included in the recovery process can also play a crucial role. To bolster media resilience and safety of journalists, UNESCO has provided safety equipment and trained journalists on topics spanning from safety, reporting on international crimes, investigative reporting and ethical standards. Journalists also received emergency financial grants. We have provided assistance to media outlets, including communications and energy equipment, as well as mentoring and advice. Ladies and gentlemen, a strong emphasis needs to be placed on action in sciences. To assess the long-term impact on the destruction of Nova Kakhovka Dam and to mitigate water scarcity and improve disaster risk management, but also to ensure that the unique scientific capital of the country, its facilities, as well as its network of researchers and research collectives, is not lost. UNESCO remains committed to mobilize and coordinate its networks and partners for the long-term recovery and reconstruction of Ukraine. The path is demanding, but by investing in people through education, sciences, culture and communication, we lay a strong foundation for a resilient and prosperous Ukraine. Without a vibrant and knowledge-based society, there can be no sustainable recovery and peace. Let me conclude by expressing UNESCO's thanks to the German authorities for hosting this important conference and including a dedicated panel on culture in the program. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Pickard. And now, last but not least, of course, I would like to invite Mr. Bakit Chusupov, the Coordinator of Economic and Environmental Activities at the OSCE.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator, Excellencies, dear colleagues. It's an honor and privilege to address this room on behalf of the OSCE, and at the outset I wish to commend the government of Germany for this initiative and kind invitation extended to OSCE. The OSCE remains fully committed in supporting Ukraine to assess and address some of the most pressing consequences of the war against Ukraine, and in terms of remediation and recovery plans, I would like to stress on two areas where my office is engaged within the mandate. First, environmental degradation and energy security. We are currently implementing an initiative to assess the environmental impacts of the war and offer options for remediation. This is being carried out in close coordination with international agencies present today here. A summary of the environment consequences of the war and the recommendations for remediation and recovery plans were released in March. We will now focus on more in-depth analysis, data management, capacity building activities to support the efforts of the Ukrainian Ministry of Environment, civil society representatives and our international partners in this field. Much of this work is coordinated with the OSCE's support program for Ukraine that was launched in November 2022 and being implemented a big range of projects in Kyiv. The program has already supported an assessment of the environmental impacts of the Nova Kakhovka dam restructuring and contributed to the methodology for environmental monitoring in this context. To help Ukraine foster energy diversification and renewables in the context of climate change, OSCE is providing national stakeholders with refined climate models and the capacity to integrate climate data into green reconstruction plans and investments. This should help Ukraine to ensure a more sustainable and resilient energy sector. Earlier last year, we commissioned the independent expert analysis on the project of the impact of Russia's war against Ukraine on climate security and climate action. Looking ahead, our goal is to buttress Ukraine's capacities to develop remediation and recovery plans, strengthen good economic and environmental governance, and transform its energy sector. Our activities will contribute and is contributing to the ongoing efforts of the UNECE, UNEP, OECD and other relevant organizations in this area, including relevant support for the platform for green recovery of Ukraine that was launched these days. The second item is the good economic governance and combating corruption. In support of good economic governance in Ukraine, last year we launched Open Data Unbroken, a small grants program supporting small business and civil society organizations in creating digital solutions to address challenges related to the war. This year we are delivering training programs for government officials, media, civil society and the private sector to improve the quality of the open data available on state platforms, increase the use of open data by the public sector and stimulate the creation of new projects using open government data. This year we only this year we trained over 120 public officials, journalists and business representatives from throughout the country. We are also working on launching a communication campaign for the DIIA e-governance portal to further promote digitalization by raising public awareness about the range of available public e-services. We are supporting Ukraine in its efforts towards building an effective regulatory framework related to virtual assets and virtual asset service providers, as well as building capacities on relevant national authorities involved in the investigation of financial crimes involving crypto assets, money laundering in particular. Asset recovery is also a key to combating corruption, and while our efforts currently focus on southeastern European countries, Ukraine is also engaged in some of the activities in this area. Concretely, Ukraine is an observer member of the Balkan Asset Management Interagency Network, BAMIN, an informal network supported by the project and comprised of offices that deal with the cost-effective management of confiscated criminal assets. The OSCE also commissioned a needs assessment on asset recovery in Ukraine and research on asset freezing confiscations. Dear colleagues, this is only some of the few examples where my office is focused. We hope that our joint efforts will create conditions for environmentally friendly and economic recovery and growth in Ukraine in line with the national needs and priorities. I look forward to our continued cooperation towards the common objective, which is to support as best as we can the people of Ukraine in these difficult and challenging times. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yusupov. And we are now reaching the end of this session. I would like to thank all of you and all of you who participated in this session for your statements, for your strong commitment to Ukraine. And I would like to underscore that it's not only about numbers, it's also about the scope of your activities, which match the needs of Ukraine, be it agriculture, be it energy, be it culture, be it private sector mobilization, social development, just to name a few, but also the focus on local governance, the focus on including civil society. And I think all this reflects very well the spirit of this URC 24 to follow a holistic and a whole of society approach, and to join all our efforts to support Ukraine as long as it takes. And with these words, I would like to thank you again and close this session. Thank you very much.